Hi guys, TacticalRab here again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. The OpTic home crowd cheese drama continues. Over the last couple of days, it's been a big talking point from players and the community members alike, and it's not going away, it seems, anytime soon. We've got organisation owners getting into the mix as well. Eggs is still flying back in the reply saying that no, OpTic should not have been allowed to host the World Championship. Players still getting involved, and also Priestahh admitting that, to be fair, despite the fact that OpTic have a home crowd everywhere, he believes that some of the players on the other teams, certainly potentially at the grand finals, were breaking as a result of the atmosphere. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new. As always, I greatly appreciate it. This picture goes really hard, by the way, as well. The black and white with the Dynasty kind of getting ready to go before their walkout they did ahead of the actual OpTic Texas walkout before the grand finals. Kremp, Formal, Karma, Scump. Just, yeah, what a moment that was this weekend. But, you know, one of these examples of things that OpTic did and OpTic tried to execute and other teams have not necessarily done so right. I think this is the crux of the matter in some respects on the frustration around the OpTic home crowd event, is that the OpTic guys are saying, well, you know, we didn't have to necessarily host this event. Other teams could have done so instead. They can be the ones saying to the league, hey, do you think we can bring the Dynasty on the walkout? Do you think we can have the drums going to get, you know, the fans ready for the final? And the league is like, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and do it. Other teams are free to do the same thing, but they don't, and OpTic do, which is one of the differences between why we had an event like this and why other teams weren't exactly hosting it. Just quickly on the Stallions. So the Esports World Cup is coming up soon. There's some speculation exactly what the groups are going to be, not confirmed yet as of recording this video, but FaZe Clan Black have qualified. So that's their, like, second team, right, that didn't win the Challengers World Championship, came relatively close to it. I think they were top 3 in the end, weren't they? But, you know, of course, Asim and those guys who were expected to go quite far, and they didn't quite win. But it's FC Black, FaZe Clan Black. The issue is that FaZe are there as well, right? So, you know, Atlanta FaZe, I think they might still be representing Atlanta FaZe rather than FaZe Clan, which is kind of confusing, given that OpTic are representing OpTic Gaming. And it's interesting, actually, if you look at the OpTic guys' bios, they've changed a lot of their bios to OpTic, just, you know, world champion player for OpTic, rather than for OpTic Texas, which has raised some questions on whether the franchise league as it stands is going to stay or go. As in, now that those guys are saying, oh, I represent OpTic, are they going to change that back to OpTic Texas after the World Cup? Or is it now going to be a thing that the franchising kind of disappears and the city-based stuff kind of disappears and we go back to just having OpTic Gaming again? I don't know. I think, like, as I've said before, I think that's going to happen at some point. Whether it happens this off-season, I don't know, probably unlikely. I'm guessing they've done that just because of the World Cup, right? But what it does mean is that Atlanta FaZe, I think, is still representing Atlanta FaZe. Maybe they're going to represent FaZe Clan, but Esports World Cup doesn't want to have FaZe and FaZe 2 effectively in the tournament. So they're telling FaZe Clan Black, you've got to represent a different name. So they are probably going to play under the Stallions, which is kind of like Zuma's thing. So to be fair, that's kind of cool. But we'll see where that goes going forwards. Kismet as well, of course. We'll talk about Kiz in a few seconds here because he was definitely the bulldog at last year's World Championship Grand Final. Not really the case so much this time around, but he actually gets straight back to the top 250 as well. So yeah, back on the grind. And it's interesting, right? Because the World Cup is a big deal. It's, you know, I know Parasite made a comment on this on the flank yesterday, but I don't think it's anywhere near as big of a deal as the actual World Championship. I've made the point on this channel before that I'm really hoping that, and they were talking about this on the flank last night as well, that the World Championship never combines with the World Cup. Like, I don't want to have the World Championship at the World Cup because I think that is the long-term vision, I think, of the Esports World Cup, is to have that happen. I've heard that no, that's probably not going to happen, and the World Championship for COD is always going to be its own thing, and then the World Cup is going to be separate. You know, look, I hope that maintains, because I'm down for the World Cup to be a thing. I mean, no problem. I don't think, at least for now, it means as much. Maybe if it's a thing for 5-10 years, people will really, you know, come to appreciate and respect the World Championship, and in addition to the World Cup, the champs is always going to be the big thing, as far as I'm concerned. I think the players would agree. But, you know, Kismet, straight back on the grind, because the World Cup matters. I mean, there's $1.8 million on the line, and, you know, the World Cup winners will be revered maybe in the same way that, like, the X Games winners were back in Ghost and Advanced Warfare, as like a cool additional event winner, but not considered quite on the same level as the main major circuit, I suppose. This is crazy as well. This is OpTic's and the other teams' search and destroy stats on the year. Now, to be fair, when you consider OpTic's 12 loss streak, if you discount the 12 loss streak and pretend it never happens, which it did, but if it never happens, there'd be 33 in, what, 24 or something, which is, you know, respectable enough. Pretty similar to Ultra HyDra or like Thieves on the season. FaZe, they won 64% of theirs, Subliners won 60% of theirs, so it just goes to show really that OpTic's search and destroy record this year wasn't great, but when it mattered on LAN and when they won, their search was good. And I think this is why people kind of say search wins championships and all this, because OpTic's respawn was excellent, obviously. Look at their team all year, but it was the search and destroy that had more questions because Kenny isn't the best search and destroy player ever. Shotzzy and Priestahh, there were questions how they would work, especially in search and destroy from like a first blood perspective, and it didn't work all the time, but when it did, it was typically the events they won. And, points that they were averaging 4.7 rounds per map. They were, basically rounds per map. And they were averaging 4.6 lost rounds per map. FaZe had the best records in terms of like their overall average differential here. And the worst, obviously, was Boston. They won 10 searches all season, 10 in 37. They were the only team to average less than 4 rounds a map, which is obviously embarrassing. They averaged 5.3 losing a map. And, they were the worst search and destroy team by an absolute mile. No real surprises there. This is interesting as well. 30 plus kill leaderboard on the season. HyDra dropped a 30 bomb 46 times. Then Simp, then Scrap, then Shotzzy. So it is literally the 4 players that I mentioned earlier today in the MVP category. They were the 4 that were dropping the most 30 bombs, which makes sense because it's impact on some level. Pred wasn't far behind. aBeZy was here as well. Sib as well, of course, had a big bounce back second half of the season. Envoy had a fair few also. But basically a third of his respawn maps, HyDra was dropping 30 plus, which it depends a bit on what maps you like to play as a team. That is relevant. But still, I mean, those numbers are categorically absurd. But I thought we'd probably had enough really of this OpTic champs hosting drama, but it has been continuing to go on over the last couple of days, and there's further clips in it that we've got to at least look through. So Hitch went through and, look, he was calling out some of the players, saying he didn't expect to see it from the players or some of the community members. To be honest, I'm not surprised we saw it from the players. I think it was pretty expected, personally, that someone was going to say something about it. Obviously, Sib and Scrappy mentioned various things about the state of OpTic hosting the event. Now, look, Toronto, Subliners were also free to host it. They didn't, and, I think I agree with Hitch's general perspective that, like, other teams could have done this and done similar things, but obviously that was not quite the case. So this is pretty funny, right? Obviously Hitch was talking about like Clayster and Zuma and Octane giving their perspective, and Clayster's like, oh, drum cheese, right? So we've had, the lights are too bright, and now the drums were just too loud, and obviously Octane was also in the replies here, but it was interesting just to hear a couple of perspectives on this, certainly from Pred on what he felt like during that atmosphere. Now look, the atmosphere, let's be honest, wouldn't have really mattered where it was. Like, we saw it at Toronto's home major, where OpTic were absolutely feeding off the energy of the crowds. But at that event, it was, I would say 50-50 pretty much. Like, there was OpTic fans there, obviously. But Toronto was a massive part of that event, massive part of that venue, and they had like half the crowd as well. So it's more about, I think, the atmosphere, rather than necessarily who the atmosphere is for on some level. But, obviously OpTic was going to have the fans, and that's how it is. And this is one of the reasons why, if you're Nadeshot, he said yesterday, if you're Drazah, you join OpTic, because it's not even necessarily just about the future, but it's also that in these moments, there is like a fifth man effect that does happen here, and Pred believes that it was affecting the mental of the other team. Now that's not anything, it's just a natural thing when OpTic play at a Call of Duty event when they're playing well, and it's not like if you bring out the drums, OpTic are guaranteed going to win, because we've seen before the drums have come out and they haven't, or we've seen Kenny get introduced at the Los Angeles Thieves. It wasn't their home world championship, but it was based in LA. I will say, like, look, I don't agree with X's perspective, but X did say, I actually remember because I wrote a note on this as a potential topic to mention in the off-season after Vanguard, that he made a point in a flank that the Thieves, basically they won champs. He said that it shouldn't have been in LA. So he actually has been consistent on this point, X, that he also made the point when Thieves won champs that the World Championship should not have been based in LA. He should have been, based at a neutral city. But of course, difficult to find. You can find neutral cities, but inevitably, given that a lot of the US is covered by some of the cities, you're always going to find a city usually where someone is based, and if it is a neutral event, or even if it is based in a city where a team is based, it's still an OpTic event at the end of the day. So Adam Adamu from Toronto actually talks about this and says, I've got no beef with X, but is the Super Bowl neutral if the home team makes it to the end? Team run events are one of the best parts about the CDL. We hosted the 2023 Overwatch League World Championship. We didn't qualify. We gave the fans an amazing show. OpTic did the same, but they won. fun. That's life. And, so I think he cooked on this one, to be fair, and also making the point really that, well, why can't Toronto do that again? Why can't they run the World Championship in the future, potentially? So a couple of clips to share here from Nature, but also from Pred.
COD esports wouldn't exist if there wasn't such a ravenous fan base like OpTic. I know some people, depending on who you are, don't want to hear that for the 1,000th millionth time, but it's true. It's funny. I think esports has been in kind of a lull, but Call of Duty, in a way, oddly enough, seems like it's like we're in our own little bubble, dude. We're in our own little vacuum where we're unaffected by the real world perils of the winds changing in esports, I would say. Like, if OpTic runs deep into a tournament, bro, there's going to be a couple 100,000 people watching no matter what. Even though competitive COD, like, throughout the year has its moments where, like, rank play isn't as interesting, people aren't playing it as much anymore. Like, Call of Duty always has that cycle in the year where it's not as interesting, not as many people are playing it, and it's kind of like a grind to get to the end of the season for the players and the community. But no matter what, the events always perform well. Majors always have a level of viewership that I think a lot of other esports kind of would love to have the consistency that Call of Duty has. I think OpTic's legacy is a big part of that too, and I think the players know that.
There's levels to this shit, bro. There's levels, bro. You have to trust yourself, bro. You know what I'm saying? You gotta trust yourself, bro. And that's why when I came to this tournament, champs, I was like, bro, this is champs, bro. I'm not flying my whole family out here not to win this shit. That was the kind of mindset I had, bro. If you guys told me, yo, AG, you're gonna come 12th at Major 4, but you're gonna win champs, what do you think I'm gonna say, chat? If I told you guys that, if I said to you, what are you gonna say? Considering you've also already won a major, what would you say? Can't wait for you to go back there. Bro, if we win the World Cup too, that would be insane, bro. I'm not gonna lie. That'd be a 400K month. Wow. All right, chat, by the way, I haven't lost with this thing. I'm 4-0. Chat, with this chain on, I'm 4-0, and I'm only wearing it for LAN. Landable, yeah, I'll be honest, bro. I play way better with fans, bro. I'll be honest, chat, without you guys there, I'm actually so dopeless, bro. Like, I love feeding off the energy, and I feel like when there's a crowd, there's an atmosphere, that's when, like, people break. That's when you can really see what's built for that type of shit, and who is more of like a joker, bro, honestly.
So I definitely agree that players in that atmosphere are more inclined to break down. Now, okay, it's a natural OpTic atmosphere, but there's like 6,000 people in there. The OpTic guys are going to feed off the energy. Players that have, the dog with it or whatever, they're going to feed off the energy. But to be fair, even if you're OpTic, there's a good chance that atmosphere could throw you off. Like, if you are absolutely like full of energy from the crowd, but that's manifesting in the wrong way, then you could get really nervous, right? Like, I think if OpTic were players with different mentalities, OpTic, generally speaking, I think Dashy was probably feeling it quite a bit. I think we saw that at the start of the World Championship Grand Final in that map 1, and was obviously feeling the pressure on him. But the likes of Pred, Shotzzy, and certainly players like Kenny, they're going to feed off that energy, whether it's positive or negative, right? Players like Kenny, they've played against the crowd in the past, use that energy for their advantage. So I think really it's not like, oh, OpTic had the crowd and therefore they won. It's more like OpTic have players that are good in those atmospheres, whether it's on the positive or negative side, and they're able to capitalize on that energy. Whereas there are many players in the league that do not have that mentality. OpTic have a high concentration of the players that do, but there are players, numerous players in the league that type of atmosphere is going to get to them on some level. And there was an argument that Pred was making that, yeah, when there's an atmosphere, people break down to some extent. And I think we probably saw that with some of the teams. I don't know what you guys think about whether that was true for the Subliners, just because I was surprised this year in general that Kismet wasn't the player that he was last year, because Kiz this year was very underwhelming. He had a good Major 4. Apart from that, pretty damn underwhelming. And, generally, he wasn't quite the same player. Like, he wasn't standing up. The picture I put on the thumbnail when he was standing up in last year's Champs Grand Finals, pointing at the trophy, saying, that's my trophy, and Scrappy, and I'm coming for it, and all this type of stuff. Like, we didn't quite get that same energy from him this year, and it did feel like Pred's probably right, that for many players in that atmosphere, they were struggling to deal with the situation, which is why LAN is just so good, and why if you put players such as Pred on your team, who have that, energy in them, and they're not going to break down, they're going to capitalize in a grand finals situation, that's a big advantage. And I think, there's an argument that Subliners, and maybe some of the players on Toronto as well, and even maybe players on FaZe, I don't know, because they were dealing with a lot of hostile crowd energy as well. Certainly Drazah was having a tough time maybe dealing with it, didn't have his best series when they bowed out to Toronto at all. So, a couple of angles on this, because obviously on the one side, it's the OpTic home crowd cheese, but on the other side, Pred's saying, well, there is some advantage, but it's not necessarily because it was an OpTic home event, it's just because we had 6,000 people in the crowd, and that is not usually the case at a Call of Duty tournament. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.